allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity to serve. We ask that you would be with us as we go through this budget for the coming year. Help us, Lord, to make wise decisions that will benefit our community, not just for right now, but for the future. I ask that you would just be with us in our conversation and be with Brooke as she presents to us what has been put in place for the budget in the city of Broward. We ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
I would like to remind everybody to speak into the microphones for streaming and recording purposes.
You're welcome.
And try to keep them away from each other. So that they don't pick up each other's reverbs.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Naomi seconds. All those in favor, the three of us, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Citizen comments. That's not the wind blowing. There's no one here at this point to comment, so we'll move on. Ex parte and conflict of interest declaration. Any conflicts at this point with what we're doing to this evening? I have none. Very good. Take care of that. Moving on. Consent agenda we don't have because we're right in the budget. Picking up where we left off with police.
Please, yep. All right.
Take it away, Brooke.
So I did want to open this session open with, does anybody have any questions? Did anybody go home and have any thoughts about what we've already covered up to this point? Possibly any changes, anything you'd like to see differently? If so, I'll run back to my office and redo it all back real quick. I say if there's any comments on what we've gone over so far.
It's awesome.
That's good.
Really good.
Now?
No, I just think, full disclosure, I mean, we're kind of going through it line by line, and hopefully anybody that has any interest in the details, it's all here in front of us. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to proceed on. Get us to where we were. So we did leave off on police and animal control, and I didn't want to, that was at the end of the day yesterday, and I didn't want, since this is one of our largest departments, I didn't want to just breeze through this one. So if we want, just as a reminder, what we talked about, the total revenue that we received from this cost center in the general fund of police and animal control is around $21,750, and that represents a good portion of that is our opioid disbursements that we receive in, and there really isn't a whole lot of revenue associated with this cost center.
And that's not a constant either.
No, you never know what you're going to get. You can get $1,000 and
Eventually, a year from now, that'll probably
end. So, just kind of the highlights of what we talked about in the expenditures. This is just a recap. Our total budgeted expenditures are going to be $2,561,000 or $2,561,819. This represents a 9.78% increase over the prior year's budget, and these are some of the items that we talked about that that went into that increase. So we're anticipating a full staffing of 15 full-time officers, 1 part-time, 2 full-time civilian plus the benefits. And as a reminder, the benefits for a police officer are a lot higher than all the other regular type of employees for the city. It costs extra to fully outfit and provide uniforms for this full staffing needs. Also, we have a lot of software needs in this department as well. A new taser replacement program has been put into the budget. And I don't know, I think maybe you should talk about that just a tad bit, just to say what that is, since that's sort of new.
So the tasers, they obviously, like any equipment and like any good company who wants to continue making profit, will only continue to manage and provide upgrades for equipment for a certain period of time. Our tasers that we have, some of them are, I'm pretty sure, at least 9 and 12 maybe years old. They work fine, but it's about the same amount of information that you get from a flip phone versus what you could get off of an iPhone 18. Just the amount of information that can go into how long someone is receiving the charge, whether there's good contact, and a lot of safety features and a lot of information can be derived from the actual machine that not only can save us some liability, but can help train and do a force review, things like that. But yeah, there's what we carry right now isn't something that we can purchase anymore. So we've gone a long time, and we've put it off because of the need. We don't use those tasers all the time, but then again, we don't use our guns all the time. But it's something that's pretty important and is a good force option for many situations. So there's really only one company that makes them, so it's not like you can get bids on them either.
And the old ones, we dispose of them.
We would have to dispose of them in part of a contract that we would sign with Axon, who's the company.
There was a rumor that one of those might be used to kind of keep you from talking too much, so.
No, we can get a much cheaper stun gun for that.
You told me.
Don't talk to my wife, please. And if she's online watching this, my iPad's gonna ding here in about 60 seconds. She'll be calling you.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted Chief to highlight that because that is a substantial new cost that we're putting into the budget, and that would be something that would continue annually, and right now we have it at $13,000.
Like a lease program, so you wouldn't have to pay for everything right away, but you would over time, lease type of lease to own type of scenario.
And he did scale it back from the original quotes that we got, so, I mean, we tried to make that program as cost effective as possible, so. Moving on, computer equipment, tough books, we talked about that. The 2 vehicle purchases, again, we scaled back from 3 to 2, so that provides us 2 fully equipped new vehicles. Patrol vehicles, yeah. And fuel costs are something else that are very high cost in this department, and then all the other equipment costs. So, are there any questions, concerns on PD and animal control? Okay, so the next cost center in the general fund is our pool. And it's a big money loser every year, but we don't anticipate that to really ever switch directions there. So we usually bring in around $47,000. That's what we've budgeted again for 2026. It's really pretty even. This includes our pool passes, swim lessons, and daily pool tickets and parties. And I think you should know that we do sell out. I mean, I worked with Sarah recently. We do sell out every weekend on parties that's available. Every weekend that's available slot, they're sold out. So the pool is getting used. So that is good news. Expenditures. The total budgeted expenditures are $170,860. That's an overall expenditure increase of 14.79%. Personnel costs are part of a good portion of that. Training, I think we have a lot of, I think we're planning for new guards next year with new training and new suits and all the things that go along with having personnel. Also, testing supplies and chemicals. I was told by staff when we went through our department meetings that we depleted a lot of our stuff that we had on hand in stock for chemicals, so we had to bump up that expense in that line item to accommodate restocking that stuff in 2026. So the detail of that is on your workbook pages. We should get there so we kind of stay fresh in the book. Our pages 36 through 38, and you can, again, you can see basically all of the expenses that are related to the pool there. I did go ahead and add in $2,000 in the budget for new chairs, shelves. Every year there's something that needs to be replaced, and they're coming with those needs. So we've set aside a little bit of money to do those things.
Good, Kurt.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know you were trying
You're
to get
fine.
that.
I'm turned down, you're way up, so,
Okay.
you know, probably for the best, but, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. The two big expenses in municipal swimming pools are the cost of the staff and then the chemicals. And we saw an exorbitant increase in commodity pricing on chlorine around the pandemic, and it just hasn't gone back down unlike some other commodities. And so that's a huge expense. The pool takes a ton of chlorine. But on the personnel side, when I first got into this industry about 7 or 8 years ago, in fact, I was your intern here in Goddard and then your assistant city admin, and one of my roles was over the pool manager. And at the time, you know, we were hiring lifeguard staff around minimum wage. And that was pretty much all the lifeguard staff, with the exception of the manager, who was probably only making a few bucks an hour more because it was typically a college-age kid or a more responsible upperclassman in high school. And so what we have seen over the last few years is, as other service level seasonal type positions have increased their wages, we have to do that as well. And it's really, really difficult to have staff if you're not willing to, you know, match the starting wage of Sonic or the other service industries. If you maybe you do seasonal mowing in the summer, if you're a high school age kid. So we went from paying $7.50 an hour, you know, 7-8 years ago. Now we're paying anywhere from 10 to 15, if not even more than that. And the, I'll call it the shift manager positions and the pool manager positions, we are paying significantly more, and we're getting a requisite value from that increased cost because we have a really, really sharp pool manager, and the middle management or the shift leaders over there are really good too. Back when we were paying those much lower wages, we were constantly dealing with problems over there. Parents were calling here all the time. Chief can attest, we would have all kinds of issues of just kids being kids in those lifeguard positions, and that's not something you want when they're responsible for health and welfare. So while we're paying a lot more, and it's creating an opportunity to attract and retain talent so we can staff a pool, I do feel like we're getting a requisite value with the staff that we have down there. In my 2 summers since I've been back here, I haven't had any calls for any incidents down at the pool. The staff is handling everything. So personnel and chemicals are really the driving factor of these increased expenses. And as Brooke said, pools are money losers, not winners, but it's an amenity that our citizens expect us to have. So I wouldn't anticipate the trend changing as far as an increase in costs, and so we do have strategies that we'll discuss, you know, later on in the year as to how we can maybe make this operate a little better financially.
Also, in the 10-year CIP in 2027, there are dollars set aside to do some more of the rehab that we've talked about, redoing the surfacing of the pool and things like that. I would try to work it in this year to see if we couldn't bump that up just a little bit, but it is in the CIP for 2027, so we went ahead and pushed that out to save those dollars right now. So, any questions on pool? Okay, so this is our Parks and Recreation department, and as I mentioned yesterday, I don't want this department getting confused with our special Parks and Recreation fund that you will see later. That's going to be completely separate. This fund here, or this department here, handles the overall maintenance of the parks, and also we maybe do small projects in this. So it does have a little bit of revenue coming into this department. The rentals of the park spaces, that's primarily the driver of this. the total revenue budgeted for 2026 is about $7,500. And you'll see later, this is pretty in line with the community center too. So we get money in through our PayPal, and we just divide that basically equally each month based on those revenues. Expenditures, in 2026, we are budgeting $182,725. That's really pretty flat. It's just up 1.74%. A good portion of this is going to be for mowing and maintenance. I believe this year we budgeted 90. 2026, we are going to bump that up just a bit because just costs go up. I believe we got 95 there for now. We do have a couple of items on here that are those larger items, but not too large that they go over to the other fund. The Rustic Creek playground equipment that's on the CIP, that's included in this cost center. And also the splash pad computer, we've been made aware doesn't work properly, so we need, and it's about a $15,000 fix that we probably ought to put in our budget next year so that thing's working properly. So those are the overall expenses there. Any questions? And again, those pages are in your workbooks as we keep rolling along here. You will also, I also want to mention in this a deferral, which we'll see in the list of deferrals later. There has been some identification of doing some different sprinkling systems or upgrading the sprinkling system over there in Linear Park. It's estimated at about $25,000. We decided not to do that this year. That's one of the costs that we did, so you will see that in the list of deferrals related to this. But it's on our radar when we feel like it's deemed necessary. Kevin had told me that he thought that needed done, but he really wanted to see kind of a year's worth of watering to see what actually needs fixed before he buys into that as something that needs done. All right, moving on to the community center, workbook pages 41 through 42. The total budgeted revenue is around $10,000, and again, that's pretty much even over 2025. Comes from our community hall rental. In 2026, we budget around $25,550, and that is up 9.3%. And it really, this is just maintenance costs on the community center. There was a large portion of renovations done in 2024 that we don't think that we're going to need to do anymore, but with a good portion of the increase came from the increases to utilities, the 5%, sorry, I just need to stay to this, the 5%, oh, 8. Okay. Keep going, okay. A good portion of that increase is related to the cost of utilities going up 5%, and I did that in any cost center and any fund just to make sure that we're covering those costs. Okay. Any questions on the community center? Pretty cut and dry. Okay. Nothing special really happening. Okay, so the library is one of our cost centers, and again, I don't want this one to be confused with the fund related to the library. We talked about how they get their 3 mills through the mill levy. This is the department within the general fund that helps the maintenance on the building, since the building is ours. So we take care of all the repairs and maintenance on that. One of the things that we're making a change to this year is, in years past, we've been doing a $35,000 additional payment to the library board, in addition to the mills that they receive. And so we kind of discussed that and kind of worked through what the purpose was of that at the time it was established. And we have met with the library today, and we talked to them through this, and what we proposed and what you will see at the July 7th council meeting is an item that will state that the city will continue to provide them the support they need. It will be given to them through the increase in valuation from the mill levy, and anything that's deficient of that $35,000 will make up that difference as the payment. So we will not give them the 3 mills and 35,000. We will give them the difference of the difference of the valuation increase. Does that make sense? And we talked to them, and I think everybody felt like they were on board, and Carrie's here today, and so we talked about all that today. So you will see overall expenditure decrease of 57,000 or 57% decrease in that fund. So
And
again,
why don't you go ahead and maybe mention that what we're kind of estimating that, the increase in the mills is gonna generate, and those 3 mills will generate an additional, I think it was about 30,000 or 35.
it's right around that. We expect it hopefully to generate more than 35,000. I think right now it's going to be really close to that number. I think probably worst case scenario would be maybe looking at $5,000 of extra payment to them to cover that, but that's a significant drop out of the general fund to cover that discrepancy.
And just over the history over time, when we weren't experiencing any growth, that mill levy value was pretty constant. But now, over the last 3 or 4 years, those 3 mills, on average, the last 3 years has been an additional $30 million each year. And I think the library's been very, prudent in terms of how they've handled their funds. And I know they do have a little bit of cash reserve for things, and I think they're in a good position. And so just year over year, it just helps us just a little bit in terms of trying to just make sure that each dollar that we're applying to things is getting utilized and maximized. So hopefully it's not going to deter or hurt the library, because they're getting a fairly significant increase in their budget year over year. So.
Right. And I think overall it's more transparent to do it this way, because to me, when we're making payments out of the general fund, that's our mill levy for our things. If we're transferring that and they're getting the mill, that doesn't reflect the true cost of their operations. I mean, their operations should be based on the mill that they establish. So, if there comes a time that they need more money, and the 35,000, they need more money, then the mill should probably be refigured to accommodate those needs at that time.
And historically, I think when that was done, that was when kind of the jump went in terms of creating a full-time position with insurance for the librarian.
Right.
So that step has happened, and now we've got growth kicking in. So there's revenue generation just based on the increase in the valuation of the mill levy. So
Yeah.
just the historical context of that.
So is there any questions on that, or any more discussion on how, are we in agreement with this? And again, you're going to see a new resolution at the next city council meeting reestablishing this process and the calculation of their payment. So. You're okay?
I think, so I just do have one really quick question. So, just for my own understanding, so we're anticipating that the amount of is it 1 mil of the 3? So their library gets 3 mils? Okay, so if it's more than what we would normally give them, that still goes to them too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So like if the dollar value of the 3 mills increases by, let's say, 40,000,
Then they
they
get
would
40,000.
they get 40,000, which would be 5 more than the
Yeah, then
35.
we would give them.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not going to pull back.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to understand it, because I'm still doing that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, we'll move on. Okay, so this department, community donations, has been completely restructured. So what this department used to be was the money we gave the chamber and a lot of different event, like the events that Danny's handling today. So all of those things, the Fall Fest, any type of expense we might have for a community event came out of this fund. We have moved all of those items to, I call it Danny's fund, it's Fund 61, Tourism and Promotion Fund. So I pulled all of those things out because we're gonna keep track of that stuff separately, and you will see all of those items later in the presentation. So what's left in this fund, Ryan, he had a great idea, let's rename this to community donations, because the other piece of the puzzle that came out of those funds was any donations we made to other organizations in town. So right now, this is going to be left as called community donations. So anytime we give a donation to somebody, this is what it's for. So in the past, these are the people that we have donated to, and this is what we plan to donate to in the future. So I feel like we need to stick true to this list, or come up with a list, or change this list, or whatever we want to do with this list to keep control of the donations that we give out each year and are able to budget for that. So you can see the Lions Club donation, the disc golf tournaments, Valley in the Park, Summer Ball Showdown, and then the Chamber of Commerce dues that we do pay them just to be a member of Chamber. So I guess I totally missed the first bullet item, the community engagement costs. So I do need to mention that we are going to allocate, it's kind of a tricky accounting situation. I've talked to our auditors, and this is how we're going to handle this. We're going to budget here also $75,000 for the community donation costs that Danny uses for her and her salary and all the events that she has. But it will be used and expensed here, but included as a revenue in the tourism fund. So it's trying to get this money out of the general fund over to the tourism fund, but you can't do it with a transfer. So you got to do it with this accounting mechanism to do that. That's the issue. The reason that we're needing to move this money to there, and it's not creating its own fund, we are expecting tourism transient gas tax to come in to cover those costs. When we were budgeting early on, prior to me being here, we were receiving more transient guest tax in on accident because it should have been going to pay the STAR bonds. So when we budgeted, we didn't remember that piece, and so we were kind of deficient in getting money there. So as soon as the STAR bonds pay off and that transient guest tax bumps up, where there'll be no need to use the general fund money to do that into the future. We could have left all of this in the general fund, but I prefer to move it over there because it's easier for her to keep track of all of her stuff, and especially if we are bringing in donations and we're having events, we need to be able to offset those really clearly, and that really is it's easy to do in a fund by itself. So you'll see tourism and what we plan to do in that one later on, but that's what's happened in this department. So it's kind of a mess. I can understand if everybody's like, I don't know what she's talking about, but I think the biggest issue in this one is I want to make sure that we agree to these donations, or these are the things that we want to pay for next year. So questions, comments, concerns?
I just think that gets back to what I think we talked about yesterday about from the bench, we need to be, more disciplined in the things that we do. So this is our opportunity at this point now, if there's changes that we need to make going into the approving the budget, that we do those things now and not decide in December to do X, Y, Z or whatever.
And these items listed are historical.
Right.
I mean, over several years. So I mean, these are the ones that we're really pretty consistent giving. But somebody comes in and says they want $15,000 for something new coming to town. It can't come here.
But I think this gets back to, full disclosure, this is what we're doing for this year, and next year, if there's a request, we'll consider it kind of within this time frame, and then it rolls into the budget, and that makes it easier for us too, for everybody.
Okay, so the senior center is our next department, and this is really pretty easy to handle. I mean, our total budget expenditures in the past were $46,000. So as you recall, last year the council approved to help fund the community center with $46,000, knowing that that number would be reduced by whatever we receive in from Sedgwick County Center for Aging, or whatever that department is. So again, this helps with operational costs, and like I just mentioned, it's supplemented by the county. As a reminder, we have hired a part-time director now that uses this money here to help with her salaries and then any operations that they have. I know that they're very active in trying to get donations and offset these costs, and we're applying those to this fund too. But this is money to help them do what they need to do. Again, we may have money coming in from the county that would offset this, that we wouldn't have to use the full 46, but it's there in case they need it. So, Brian, did I say that correctly? I know this is kind of your...
Yes. And if you haven't had a chance to meet Ella, she has been wonderful to have on board as our part-time senior director. So she is actively working with the Senior Citizens Advisory Board on making the grant application for 2026. That's going to be due sometime in late July to Sedgwick County, and then we'll find out what our funding is from the county later in this year for next year for 2026. But what we did for 2025, just to remind everyone, is that the $6,000 grant that we were awarded for 2025, that is all going towards Ella's salary. I think our plan will be to do that as well for 2026. So whether it's $6,000 or maybe perhaps a larger amount that we receive from Sedgwick County for 2026, that will all be applied in this fund. Yes.
And then that reduces our exposure.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, so it's a reimbursement. It's a reimbursement, yes.
Reimbursement.
Yep.
Some of the larger communities that have senior center programming, I'm thinking of the one more to the southeast and south. I mean, they're getting a few $100,000 a year, but they have huge programmatic things built out into the. So at some point, it would be the goal that the city at large is not having to contribute anything to that, and it would be fully funded through the county, such as the others are.
All in good time. All in good time. I mean, the latest stats, I think we're closing in on 600 members. I was told we're at 578. So maybe by the 4th of July, it'll be a firecracker 600 member. Maybe they should get, ride the patrol car or something. Congratulations, you're the lucky 600 member. We'll see. Some ideas. All right, I'm moving on. I'm quiet. We got to keep this show on the road here. Keep moving.
All right, moving on.
I think I'm in a little bit.
There we go. Okay, so our next department is economic development. And again, these pages are going to be on page 40 through 49. I'm going to need to reference these. So this department doesn't have any revenue coming in, but we do have some expenditures, and our total budget expenditures in 2026 are $37,900. The overall expenditures decreased by 46%. This is due to a major reallocation of salaries. So we are moving all of Micah and Tina, and if they hire anybody, we're not, that wasn't on the agenda, you're not hiring anybody on it. Those two are all going to go to planning and zoning in 2026. So we're pulling those salaries out and putting them in that department. This department also has software costs, which we have looked at, and Mike has done a good job of determining what we use and what we don't use. And I know there's a couple Placer AI we're not going to use anymore going into the future. So that was a big cost that we saved. We're going to eliminate the retail attractions contract as well for $36,000. It brings that down as well. So there are some cost savings that we pulled out of this fund as well, or this department as well. Any questions on that one? Okay, so moving on to planning and zoning, workbook pages 50 through 52. The total budget expenditures are $365,315. An overall expenditure decrease of 58%. Again, this is a major personnel reallocation. I'm gonna double check something here. That is not a decrease. That is an increase. I apologize. That don't look right. Okay. That is an increase. Everybody, please note, increase of 58% because I've moved the salaries into this fund. So, if you look at, just to follow along on page 51, you can see my year-over-year change is 58.9. That should be a positive, not a negative. Apologize about that. So again, a major allocation of personnel. Mike and Tina will be in this. Also, I just want to say legal fees for all the planning and zoning gets expensive, so a good portion of that's been allocated to this fund. In the past, it hasn't been, but I'm trying to reallocate all legal fees to where they're really going, and so a lot of them in the past have just gone to administration, and so this department's, absorbing a lot of the planning and zoning and code, all of those things that we have to do. Also, our software costs. There's some very important software that's needed in planning and zoning that our mapping, our Civic Plus as well. So, also Tina is going to be doing the CPM program next year. So we've included those costs to send her to do that training and do all the travel with that as well. So, sorry about that typo. That makes me mad. Okay. It's right.
On page 50 it is right.
Yeah. Okay. So code enforcement, workbook pages 53 through 55. Our total budgeted revenue is estimated to be $210,000. That's overall revenue increase of 5.75%, and the revenues pretty much derived from our building permits. Right now, they're kind of behind schedule in 2025, but I think they're going to catch back up when the rain and everything settles down. People start getting out there and finishing up some of those projects. I did estimate it down just a little bit, I believe, but actually I took an average. I took an average of the past 3 years and kind of budgeted conservatively on that. Building permits, zoning permits. Also, just to note, in 2024, we had our stormwater maintenance fee going into that department. Now, that stormwater maintenance fee is going into our stormwater fund. So that's pulled out of that and it's in its own fund. The expenses for 2026 are budgeted for $174,605. That's a decrease of 26.76%. That represents the major reallocation of salaries. This leaves our contracted code enforcement. So we wanted to be clear that, we are still planning to pay Pro Code next year for our code enforcement. And therefore all the salaries really shouldn't be in there, and we want that to truly represent what it's costing for code enforcement. Software as well is another thing that we use, OpenGov, Plus, a good portion of those costs. Also, a major cost that we have in this department is our county inspection fees. So almost half of our revenue from building permits goes to that partnership with Sedgwick County, and I don't know. We've kind of talked about changing that at some point in our life, but I don't know enough about it to talk about it. But that may be something in the future that we talk about. So, yeah. So.
It's a good time to talk about it.
Okay, let's talk about it. Somebody talk about it because I don't know what to say about it.
That line item should almost be exactly 50% of the building permit fee revenue, because we split that with MABCD at Sedgwick County. So in a perfect world, and I think we'll be there in a few years, we would be doing building inspection in-house, but the cost benefit analysis, unless you're able to hire 2 full-time experienced credentialed building inspectors from day one, the cost benefit analysis doesn't really pin out, in my opinion, and I think my colleagues and I have some constructive disagreement about that, which is good. But I've been of the opinion that, you know, we need to give it a few years, and then if we can go poach a couple of really strong building inspectors, that way when they start day one, they're capable, then it could work, and we may gain, I don't know, 10-15%, just speculating. But you gotta think of how much a person costs when you think about their wage plus, you know, another 20% for benefits. The office space, the overhead, the commodities and things like that that an employee requires. So at this point, with nothing else changed, it feels like the better return is to continue collaborating with MABCD. When you think about how much building's going on here right now, you need some really solid and experienced folks day one if you were going to take that in-house.
But it does raise the question. I mean, I've had several comments with some people that have neighbors, their tile in their bathrooms is falling off the wall. I'm not going to say what builder or where, but I mean, what kind of control and feedback do we get from, and what insurance do we have that, you know, we're paying this money and that, you know, there's good inspecting going on. You know, I mean, if I'll take your 100,000, I'll go do the inspections, I'll be done by noon and playing golf by 1, and then, you know, oops, you know, things are off, you know, the light sockets or, you know, electrical issues or whatever, plumbing issues and things, just general comments I've heard from 3 different people here. It's always interesting, you get this feedback like in a 2 or 3 week period on the same topic. How that happens, I don't know, but at least it just raises the question, and so.
Well, inspectors, and we've talked a bit about this before, so I'll answer the part that I know I can and then give it to Micah for the rest, but they're not inspecting craftsmanship and they can't guarantee those things, and there's typically a 1-year warranty that the homeowners need to be getting a punch list and getting those things addressed at the cost of the builder. In the case of the rental, obviously it's a different scenario, that's not as helpful, but the inspectors are looking for nothing more than code compliance, and they're not going to do anything about craftsmanship issues. Now, as far as whether we have any guarantees or a check to make sure that MABCD is actually showing up and ensuring everything is to code, Micah, you could maybe speak more to that.
Yeah, you know, and I'm going to give some time to Ryan too, because all of my ideas are completely theoretical. Because so Ryan actually has experience dealing with having in-house code enforcement. So, you know, I'm all dreams and wishes. But for MABCD, we are actually one of the first cities to piggyback off of their portal system. So we can backdoor off the portal system. If somebody had questions about who showed up, which inspector, what time, and what they did, we can look at the portal and see when they clocked in, what they inspected, and who it was. And so we're actually one of the few cities that can actually do that. And this is something that we did back in 2019. We went down to the building for MABCD and had this partnership, and they graciously allowed us to piggyback off their system. So we have a login, and we can see what they're doing and where they're doing it. And not only that, but we can derive data from that. We can see where the building permits are, where if they have a certificate of occupancy, who did the footing inspection, and everything else. And so we're one of the few cities that can do that for guaranteed purposes. As Craig mentioned, paint jobs, soffits falling out, things of that nature, that is a craftsmanship thing. There's a punch list that they go through for quality inspections that follows the IBC. Anything outside of that is just going to be kind of an unfortunate situation. But I'll give my time up for Ryan so he can talk about his personal experience with Valley Center.
Yeah, in Valley Center, we went through the process of transitioning from MABCD to having an in-house building inspection. So that process, it did take us a couple of years because the person we did hire did need to go through the training. So they, with the International Code Council, became certified in each of the different building code requirements. So you've got residential and then the 3 trades, HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. So we did that both for residential and commercial. Now we use the same, and I believe Goddard does as well, but Valley Center uses the same certificate of occupancy form as Sedgwick County does. And it clearly states on there that the county is not held liable for any inspection. So I would assume that when we get to the point where we are hiring our own inspections, that we would want to make sure that that language is on that certificate of occupancy and completion that states that the city is not held liable for any damages. But we do, I think, have the guarantee that the person that we are hiring to do the certification, to do the inspection, as Craig had mentioned, that they do have credentials, that they do have certifications, that they know what they're looking for when they're going in and doing these residential or commercial inspections, whether it's a footing or looking at electrical or HVAC, whatever the case may be, that they do have those credentials and qualifications in order to adequately look at performing building inspection. But the county does, and I would suggest that we do the same when we get to that point. Make sure that on the form that we use that lists all of the inspections with the date and the inspector's initials, that somewhere on there it does state that the city is not held liable for any deficiency in the building itself.
Any other questions? You good?
I'm good.
Do you know any certified inspectors or people who have credentials, and if you're related to one or anything, let us know, and we could probably put them to work, and we wouldn't have to share half of those fees.
I might know that. I might.
I was gonna say all that. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Good job, guys. Good job.
Thanks, Rob.
Alright, so that's code enforcement. I guess any more discussion on this, we'll move on, not? Okay.
Oh, you want to make a distinction that code enforcement's not animal control, so just let everybody know that.
Okay.
Historically, it used to be, it's not, so just to make that abundantly clear.
Code enforcement, we used to do animal control. Originally, it would fall under code enforcement, but now animal control is completely in the police department. So
Yeah.
if people have questions about that, there's a clear distinction there.
Yeah.
Different kind of animal.
Doesn't mean you can't help.
Okay.
Raccoons.
I'm not responding.
So our final department, and this really isn't a department, but it's a section in our general fund that's really important, is our transfers. And one of the things, I mean, maybe being new on the council, or anybody listening, if anybody's listening, I don't know if anybody's listening, I don't know who'd listen to this, but, you know. Transfers are very important, but you can't just transfer. You can't, okay, we're out of money over here, I need to transfer money. I've got to have statutory authority to do so. And there has to be a law that says I can transfer from this fund to this fund. It says I can't, it doesn't say I can transfer to this fund or any fund that I want. So you will see when we complete the final budget, there's a schedule of transfers that we have to live by. So if we say we're transferring money from the general fund to capital improvement fund, there's a statute that says we can do that. And that's the amount we can transfer. We can transfer less, but we can never transfer more, but it goes against our expenditure authority. So as we say, our total budget's a total dollar amount, those dollars are in there as, even though they're going in and out of city funds. We have to abide by that. So that can be really confusing to people. So, I mean, I think my husband, I hope he ain't listening. You know, he said, just transfer, you know, just make a transfer out of that fund and put it over. I'm like, you can't do that. You have to have a reason, and you have to have law, and you have to say that we can do that. So, the things that we have scheduled, for 2026 are, in 2025, you can see here, these are the things that we've decided to transfer. Total transfers in 2026 are set at 1.9 million. So I want to go back and state, as you recall, we talked about that $335,000 that was going to be paid for the architectural work at North Park. And so we plan to be reimbursed by that money. So we will have that additional $335,000 in the general fund. We could possibly need to bump up the streets operating transfer of $700,000 by some of those dollars that were left over from that piece. I'm working on the street fund right now. It's looking like it's probably gonna need a little more help to do, you know, the operational type needs over and beyond, we still have money for the 5 and 5, 1 million. You can see that's going in there and that's easy to track, but that 700,000 that's going to the streets is not really keeping up with the cost of the annual maintenance, salaries, and all the things that go into doing the streets. So we may need to bump up our transfers there, and at the final presentation of this is what we're doing, you'll probably see that. So we've decided to transfer to our, well actually we're eliminating our equipment reserve in 2026. Just because we're trying to cut some costs coming out, because we've got those large costs coming out of the line item discretionary where we already have a deficit, and so we're trying to reduce that deficit. Nothing is going into the capital improvement fund either. All of the capital improvement that's happening on the streets is actually going to be handled in the street fund. So I'm going to move all that to the streets instead of putting it into the capital improvement fund, so it's easier for us to track there. And then we'll budget for those expenditures in that fund. So let's say we transfer it there and we don't spend it all in 1 year, it doesn't get lost in the capital improvement fund, and it's there for us to use as we continue the process. Special parks, that's the fund that I talk about that's outside the general fund. We're going to transfer out of the general fund into special parks. We're actually going to need to reduce that in this year again to try to have some cost savings of our general fund, trying to keep it where it needs to be. And again, here in just a bit, we'll talk about fund balance and why all of these things got kind of juggled that way. Equipment reserve, we'll get $160,000 for our police cars. So we talked about the 2 that we needed. So we're going to pull out of the general fund, move it into equipment reserve to hold it for those purposes. Equipment reserve IT schedule, we need to move $35,000 out of there into equipment reserve because we have a schedule with our IT provider. We meet with them all the time, and they provided us a budget for next year of the things that we're going to spend money on. When we start talking about the equipment reserve fund, I will line item all those things that we're doing, and so you'll get a better feel of what that is. But that's the overall cost of computers, rotations, the ones that are, you know, out of service and things like that. The streets 5 and 5, there's our $1 million. There it is, it's going out of the general fund like we promised, right over there into the street fund, so we can do that project, and then the street operating as well. Again, be prepared to see that $700,000 change a bit at the end of the day to accommodate trying to get that operation budget back up just a little better. Our year-over-year change, we're going to actually, it's actually going up $148,000. Year-over-year change is 8.35%. So again, transfers can be kind of tricky. They're kind of hard to understand, but we have to be very careful when we're doing those. And at the end of the day, if by chance, I mean, the general fund isn't really highly likely of going over budget because it's got so much and we've got a big reserve. How we do things, transfers is the last thing would get cut. So if we need to reduce expenses in something, we don't do a transfer, or we reduce transfers to stay within our budget authority. So, but that can really mess things up if you don't get your money over where the other fund needs it. So we gotta balance all of those things out real good.
But I think this is kind of a change in philosophy in terms of our previous person running and putting the budget process together. This tightens things up to where there's not as much wiggle room, which is, I think, more of a disciplined approach to how we handle finances. So I think as we're growing, there's more importance, I think, to be put on the planning that we've done, making it clear ahead of time how we're going to spend money for whatever capital projects and stuff, as opposed to just kind of rolling through the year and doing things as, you know.
I plan to, when we do the capital improvement fund, it's going to be really primarily used for our temp note projects. If we go out for bond for North Park, the money's going to go in there, and because we need to handle it there before it goes to permanent financing. Basically temporary projects. Right now our SCADA project's in there. I can monitor it in there and I'm keeping track of it. I think things more like streets, that might be easier to keep over there. So I'm just trying to keep it organized where we can keep track of things a little better, so. Okay.
Touche.
Cost reductions and deferred items. Boy, we worked really hard to scale back all of our wants and needs. We could probably go for days of all the things we want to do, but we can't do everything in 2026. So we had to make some cuts, and we put together a list of things that we just to kind of make it handy for you. Overall, we've cut out about $902,000. Nope, sorry. Page 13. Sorry, thank you, Craig.
Unlucky page 13, the cuts and rejections are on 13.
So as a reminder, a lot of these I've already mentioned. Lobbying services, we cut those out. We don't feel like we're going to use those in 2026. The library contribution is coming out. There will be a little bit that full 35 may change. I mean, we may give a little bit, but so that 35 may be a little bit less. The retail attractions contract for the economic development person, we will not be doing. The Placer AI software for $15,000, we won't be doing that next year. The discretionary outlay normalization, that just shows that from 2025 to 2026, we're spending $500,000 less on that line item. Just to show you that, we're trying to reduce the expenditures out of that line item. City Hall capital equipment, we're not needing to do that again, since we've got that all taken care of. Transfers to the park, we have removed. A police officer position was removed out of our needs. We plan to do one less, so that saved us around $84,000. A police car was also removed. That saved us $85,000. The taser replacement program, when Lance went back and requoted it and refined that, we were able to reduce that down by $6,000. Uniforms for the police, we reduced that budget down by $10,000 to really tighten that up a little bit. It's going to be hard, but we're going to try to make some cuts there as well. Council training, we reduced our initial cost by $5,000. Linear park sprinkler upgrades, this is what I mentioned. We're going to delay till 2027. That's an estimate for the $25,000. We didn't feel like it was an immediate need, but it may be something we want to pursue in the future or not. Pool capital transfer, again, that was something that we tried to do this year to help with the pool in 2026, but we went ahead and pushed that to 2027. Again, that was on the CIP, so I didn't feel too bad saying, well, we originally said it was going to be in 2027. I was trying to be too aggressive there. And transfer for equipment for linear park cameras. That's something that we probably really need, but I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to push off to 2027. So, give and take.
Get an email prepared for you guys for some more.
2027.
Yeah, come to me in 2027. We'll talk. So.
I know where there's a few quarters underneath a rug out back here. They got some extra.
Any questions on the reductions?
I just want to thank the staff for your willingness to kind of whittle this down. You understand how this is color coded? With the ones up gray, those are ones that we're in 25, we're not doing in 26. The ones that are in that blue are a reduction between how much we spent on them in 25 versus this year. And then the ones in green there, you can see one of them was a position we removed, and then a reduction from what we originally anticipated for those to be in 26. And then the purple there, ones are just, considering in the 27 fiscal year. Mayor, we had kind of sent the drafts out to you guys. Mayor had made a comment to us that, well, it looks like you guys are saying you cut $902,000, from the budget. that's not quite the case. I mean, some of these items were clear cuts in the top area, but some of them we started here in the planning process and we worked it down. So we wanted, Rick did a great job of kind of categorizing those, so.
Okay, this is the fun part, the fund balance forecast. I've said it so many times, 25%, we're gonna remain there, and every fund in the world is gonna stay at that, except for debt service, so we'll talk about that later. So, in our financial policy that we adopted not very long ago, we have a policy now that says we will keep 25% of our operating expenses as a balance in our fund. And so, as I'm putting this budget together, that's kind of my Bible. I mean, if the revenue's coming in, the expenses going out, where does it land us? And I'm like, if it's below the 25%, I'm like, wait a minute, you know, or maybe it's way ahead, or we're okay, more in there than we need. So I can really just play with numbers to try to get us to where we need to be, where we feel comfortable. I know we want to spend more money than we are bringing in this year, and we did the same thing last year, so I kind of want to look at those trends and see how is this going to play out in the long run if we keep this up. And so we have built up a large fund balance in the general fund, so that helps us be able to absorb those extra costs to build, to do things and plan for larger projects in the future. So those are the things that are really eating up the fund balance that we've done. So the revenue that I put in here, this is a projection out through 2029, just kind of where we are, where we were, and where we will be based on some assumptions. Revenues increased from 5.1 million in 2023 to 8.4 by our tax growth, our revenues, our valuation increases. It just kind of shows how it goes into the future. I budgeted in an arbitrary $300,000. It's kind of a traditional other revenue sources in there as well. Expenditures rise from 3.6 million to 6.4 with 2025 increases limited to $300,000 annually to reflect that as well. So actually, I'm sorry, I take that back, what I said earlier on the $300,000 is here on the expenditure side. So that's kind of the increase over year is kind of what we're seeing is kind of a projection with all the increases that we have. Transfers out is kind of my plug number. So I have my revenues in, I have my expenses out. Everybody's asking me operating, pay the policeman, you know, use more software, you know, whatever it is, and then that's kind of our operating. Transfers is my plug. So the transfers is the final thing that takes money out of our fund, like I said, so that's where I start adjusting things down, if that's the case. So transfers out climbed to as high as 1.9 in 2026, which you just saw, but then I have reduced it back down to 1.3 to kind of stabilize those transfers after 2029, where we won't be transferring out as much to kind of catch back up with our fund balance. This is all on page 15, 16 probably. So in 2023, you can see just some of the history. Our ending fund balance was at 2.8 million. Based on our 25% reserve requirement, we need to keep 1.1. We were over by 1.6. So back in 2023, we were sitting at 60%. There's nothing wrong with keeping healthy, high balances. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all, especially if you've got plans for that money. We did have plans for that money that we're putting there. Then, you know, as we start getting down to 2026, you can see our ending fund balance based on us eating up that fund balance and going in the hole. We get close to the mark right there. However, 24.27% isn't terrible. I mean, I know our policy says 25, but that's a goal. we reduce our transfers in 2027 to start stabilizing that and money going out, we can bring our fund balance back up, and then we start doing that again. So again, I mean, we're gonna have revenues coming in that's growing, we're gonna have expenses come in that's growing. I factored those in, but if we can reduce the transfers out to different things that we don't necessarily need so much, then that's gonna be the place that we need to cut. Okay? We're still setting at a healthy amount of cash. I mean, I've worked in cities where this has gone to zero, so that's scary. Right? I mean, I've seen their audit and it says zero, so you know, it's like, wow, look at that, right to the penny.
We're in city, she wasn't the CFO there. Just saying.
No. Noted. So I mean, we are staying within our percentages. That's going to be, if that starts dropping down, like if I'm doing this analysis mid-year 2026 and all of a sudden we're at 18 or 15%, maybe we have to pull back on something mid-year, and there's nothing wrong with that as well. But this is going to be our guide to make sure we're keeping healthy reserves in all the funds. So we have a lot of things coming up. Here's just a graph that kind of shows the revenue and expenses in your fund balance. The green is the orange is your revenue, green is your expenses, and then your fund balance, and just kind of how it hangs out there over time. Any questions on that? One of the things, I do have a S&P ratings call tomorrow, and this will be the first time we've been able to provide them an adopted CIP with a resolution and a financial policy that was approved. So I'm hoping that might give us a little bit better stuff for them to say, wow, look at you guys. So so proud. But that reserve policy is going to be something that they really like.
So the increase in our bond rating would result in a lowering of the interest rate on the debt we're issuing.
Right.
So that is kind of a big deal.
It is. And we have about the best you can get for a city of our size. You gotta be really big and very conservative to get that AAA rating. Where are we at, AA minus?
Sorry, I don't know.
That's okay.
I should know those things.
Yeah.
But even moving up to AA, incrementally, it all makes a difference.
It does. Totally does.
And also on that questionnaire that we have for tomorrow, I mean, they talked about our water rates. Have you done anything with those? I mean, they're giving me a lot of questions, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. What do you want to know? So, we've done it. So, we're making improvements, slowly but surely. So, all right. So to wrap up the general fund, I think everything. Honestly, I think we're setting pretty good for 2026. I mean, we have a lot of things we want to do. We just got to make sure we don't have too many surprises pop up. If we do, we need to make some adjustments. We do our finances monthly. We get reports quarterly. I check fund balances all the time. So it, you know, we're keeping good track of all that stuff. The 2 mil increase that we're proposing is definitely going to help. It's going to help with our 5 and 5 plan, which is one of the first projects we put on the list, since that's something we promised. So, I mean, that's something that we plan to do, and you can see that we're continuing on with that program. We've got to be happy about our assessed valuation going up 129% from 2022 to 2029. That's our projection, so that's going to be really good too. So, all in all, the general fund doesn't scare me really at all. This fund, they're not too bad. There's one coming up we're going to talk about, but we'll save that one for another day. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Do you have changes? Do we want to adjust anything? Comments? If not, we got 2 more funds to go through tonight. These will go quick. These are 2 quick ones, so.
I don't have any questions. It looks so clean. I like how clean it all looks. just keep thinking about with the way that you put it together, and it's easy to read and understand. So thank you.
Doubled it up. I mean, it's taken a tremendous amount of time and effort to do this. Receiving input from the staff, working it through to this point, broader participation than we've ever had before, projections going out to look ahead. I just appreciate everyone's effort. This is a grind.
Yeah.
This is a grind, but this is the type of things that you need to do to continue to be successful. So, thank you, all of you, for all your work and everything. This is, as I used to say, this is good stuff.
It really feels like we're maturing as a city. You know, we're not stuck back in the old times, and I really am so grateful. I'm excited about it. So thanks.
This document here, right, is available online?
Not yet.
Not yet, but it will be for,
Can be, yep.
I didn't know if there was something
Let's talk,
transparency
Danny.
wise that.
We'll get together.
So once we get to a point where we feel like everything is set where we want it to be, then it will be published online. Because it's a static document, we want to make sure that it's all the way up to date before we publish it. So the best and most accurate information is what the public will be seeing. So, and of course, it is online. I guess I take that back. It is online because it's in the agenda packets that go out.
Okay.
And if it hasn't been included in those, we'll make sure that it gets out there.
Awesome. It's such a great it's such a good product.
That-
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think we need to, you're not required to send out an agenda packet for these types of meetings. You're not even really required to have an agenda, but we haven't uploaded a packet, I don't think, for these, so we can put that together and get that on the webpage, and it'll just kind of slot in with all the other agenda packets, so it will be online relatively soon.
And I guess I could watch the video too, so, you know, just for transparency reasons, because it's such a good product, it's so easy to understand, and I think that if people have questions, they could either come back and watch the meetings, or they could download the packet, and then they could ask questions if they need it, but it's such a good product.
Thank you. At the end of the day, when we're all done, and every fund is done, and every workbook is included, it will also be enhanced with the extra supplemental information that's required by GFOA to submit it for the award. So there's a lot of things that, you know, org charts, and there's a lot of other narrative that will go into this book that surrounds the budget as well. So I mean, when that's done, that will be the product we want to put out there.
Typically that would come around the time you're certifying the budget.
Yeah.
So you're getting this fund by fund in these individual packets. There'll be one combined final document that you get at the end of summer,
Yeah.
early fall.
Yeah.
And that'll be online too.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Good.
Does anybody need a break? I just want to say, are we good? Good roll? Let's roll? Okay, let's do it. Okay, so the next two funds we're going to talk about, and these will go pretty quick because these are really pretty cut and dry funds, but they're the ones that are also, as you recall, set by a mill levy. So I wanted to keep these three together so we could get these done. So tonight, this group is our bond and interest fund and our library fund. In the bond and interest fund, we'll talk about our summary of outstanding bond debt. It'll kind of show you the bonds that we have outstanding, when they mature, and what the purpose was. A revenue and expense summary of those, the payment allocations, and a fund balance forecast. In the library fund, we'll just talk about the mill levy revenue projection and the funding pass-through. So it's an in and out, and we'll talk about that too. So just as a reminder, our bond and interest fund supports the repayment of our city's general obligation bonds. We get 2.377 mils allocated to our GO debt. Our GO debt funds our public infrastructure, water sewer improvements, economic development initiatives, basically any debt that's not supported by, well, yeah, all of those things go in there. That is correct. I'm getting off track here. In January 1st of 2025, our outstanding GO debt was $22.49 million. I don't want that to be confused. All of our temporary note bond issuances are not held in this fund. They are held in the capital improvement fund. So that 22 million that you're seeing, you know, in the capital improvement fund, you know, part of that is over there. This is only debt that's gone to permanent financing. So anything temporary is held there, permanent financing is held here. This fund is funded through our property taxes, like I mentioned, and in 2026 we're projecting to have $207,000 in mill levy revenue to support our debt. We also receive money in from the county for special assessments. We transfer in from our water and sewer utility fund for any debt related to those sorts of projects. We receive a pilot payment in as well to cover or help offset the debt for the Olympic Park bond. And then we get bond proceeds as well as a revenue source. There we go. So our summary of our outstanding bond debt, I find this chart to be pretty helpful, just kind of let you understand all of our GO bonds that we have outstanding and what their purposes are. So like I mentioned earlier, as of 1/1/2025, our outstanding GO bond debt in the debt service fund is $22,485,000. Over here, I think the purpose is really important for you to look at so you can see the bonds and what they are related to. We have to divide all those different components out when we're doing our calculations to determine, you know, the mill levy that comes in is covering this, the special assessments is covering this, the water and sewer funds are covering this, just to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share of this fund. Our earliest debt retirement is going to be in 2028 when our water storage tank and street improvement bond, 2013 bond matures. Everything else is out there a little bit. Yeah, 2034, that's our next one, water and sewer improvement. So that's a summary, so you can have that ahead of you. So moving on, our revenue summary. This can be really tricky to understand, and I don't expect you all to be bond counsel, because I'm not, that's why we got one. This shows our revenue of our projected revenue for 2025 and our 2026. We receive in our ad valorem taxes, our other special taxes. We've been receiving in our interest income. Again, like I said, a piece of our total interest revenue comes into this fund based on the fund balance of this. It's allocated to that. So I'm anticipating it maybe going down a little bit because we're going to pull some money out of this fund, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Our pilot for Olympic Park, that is a really conservative estimate. I'm guessing and kind of hoping that that's a little higher than 100,000. As evaluations out there increase over time, that pilot payment is recalculated annually, and hopefully that will be going up. Bond proceeds, this one's kind of tricky to understand because we're going to be taking a couple of temp notes this year, transitioning them into permanent financing, so they're going to move into this fund. So we have to anticipate those bonds that are maturing this year in the temp notes moving into this fund. So what's going to happen is we're going to receive some extra cash in to cover interest payments before they go on the tax rolls and we start receiving that money in. So that's what the estimated bond proceeds are. This year is $800,000, which will actually help pay for stuff next year that comes in. We've kind of estimated $400,000 next year in this scenario as well. So it's kind of we get cash this year, the cash is in the bank, we're going to have bond payments next year, you're going to see those come out next year. So it's kind of a kind of a tricky balance of trying to making sure those work. You'll see an old line here for temp note proceeds. Again, in the past, sometimes they were handled in this fund, sometimes they weren't. I'm not handling any in this fund anymore, so that's why that's why there's such a discrepancy there. Transfers from sewer fund and water fund, they've been set at certain amounts, but I reallocated the actual payments from those particular funds based on their true proportion of the debt. So I don't know how they were set up in the past, but this is what I think it should be based on that. And you will see that, you know, transfers from the water fund into this is less, which will help our water fund build a little better because it's going to come from sewer, because I think a good portion of that from that. Just something that you'll hear when we talk about the capital improvement fund, you know, things that we financed this year, like the SCADA project that we received money in, we're not going to permanent financing. We have 3 years to go to permanent financing before that comes into this. So those sort of debt payments aren't calculated in this fund. We'll wait until we go to permanent financing with those, and there'll probably be about a year lag before that all hits our books where we have to do that. Year over year change in your dollar, I mean, to me, every year is different, so I don't know how relevant those are, because we're going to have different issuances and different things coming online. It's kind of hard to just say it's good or bad, because it's just kind of the way the fund works. Expense summary, the things that are going out. We had some legal publications in the past. Principal payments, interest payments, these have been calculated based on what we expect currently for our bond payments. And again, we have factored in any potential bonds coming on the schedule for next year that we don't even have amortization schedules for, but we put some money there to hopefully cover those. Again, all temp note interest and all of that stuff is not in this fund anymore. I do want to talk about this 2022-1 partial defeasance. So we were doing some research on. Is it okay to talk about this? Yeah. You're good? Okay, because you're going to hear more about this. So we were sitting on a pretty high fund balance in the debt service fund, and that kind of rose a question with me, like why? Because typically you get money in and you pay money out, and it should pretty much be zero, but I mean, you don't want to run it to zero, but that's the way it works. So we're sitting on a pretty high fund balance. And I was noticing some discrepancies in the special assessments that we were bringing in and our payments. So there was kind of a pretty big gap in between those, and so it wasn't matching up. So we talked to bond counsel and our financial advisors, and we got to talking about how back in 2021-2, that issuance, there was a recalculation of assessments after it had already gone to permanent financing. And so we had received a bunch of cash in our bank. The specials were recalculated, reduced there. So we're bringing in less money, but we have all this cash. But we're sitting on all this cash. So what we're doing is, and this is in the process, we were on the phone with the team earlier today, we're going to take that excess cash that we have, move it to an escrow account, and it's going to be held by a trustee to pay off those bonds quicker. And so with that, there's going to be some savings of paying that stuff off quicker. I think, what was $100,000 a year in bond payments that will take care of that. That just sitting there in our fund could cause issues with IRS. If we spend it accidentally on stuff that we didn't realize, well, we got all this money in here, let's spend it. We just don't know. We didn't know why we had that money there. So it came to light, and we came up with a dollar amount of what we thought we received in the bank that was too much. So we're trying to get that all straightened out. You're going to see something coming before the council to do this defeasance process, to take that money out of our account, take that debt off of our books, and it'll be held by a trustee that will be paid by them.
So that I just want to make sure it's clear that this is related to special assessments for some of our subdivisions. So if you guys remember in late 2023, you might have been watching council or at the council meeting because you guys weren't on the board yet, but we had a bunch of the citizens show up from like Arbor Creek and Elk Ridge, and it was because of what Rick mentioned earlier, some kind of a miscalculation, wrong spreadsheet. We don't really know the origins of it. Happened before our time. It was our problem to deal with. So we did the specials respread during that 2023 meeting. People got new notices and stuff. So because of the timing of when the money hit our account and then that respread, et cetera, it necessitated this scenario to need to happen to clean up the accountancy.
Yeah.
So, I want to make sure it's understood that this doesn't have anything to do with like city at large debt, GeoBond debt for like any of our city projects. This is all related to special assessments for those subdivisions. It was like the last phase of Elk Ridge, Arbor Creek Collector, Arbor Creek Phase 1, and I think maybe even Cloverleaf had a little bit to do with that.
Yeah.
So this will kind of be like the last thing we have to worry about to clean up that situation that was bequeathed to us. So.
So, again, that's coming like in the next council meeting to all of the processes of doing such a thing. That's gotta be as clear as mud. I mean, that's crazy stuff right there, so. Riveting, okay?
Well, I wanted to make one other comment, Brooke. I think it would be helpful if we could get a debt schedule for everything on page 1, and if you could show the principal and interest annual payments, just I think 2022 to 2029 to keep up with consistency. But I think it would be nice to be able to see like what is the annual debt service on GeoBond 2020-2.
Okay.
And I could show you a sample of what I'm talking about from an old budget book I did one day.
I got it all done already.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so, debt payment allocation, I think it's important to know which funds are having to pay, you know, some of this extra stuff. So sorry, you're looking at your pages. Page 4 in the back, yeah. So we have, I classify the bonds in groups, like we have water and sewer debt, that was one, and this is our payment. So you can see this bond was a water and sewer debt, and that's how it was allocated. We have a water and street project, and that's how that one was allocated. We have a street debt, that goes there. Olympic Park debt is the $258,000, and then our special assessments, that's what we're looking at. So those are the total kind of category debts that we're looking at, and when we make our transfers from those funds, you know, those will be coming into here to make those things happen. Now you got to remember, streets, we don't transfer into here from streets because you didn't see a transfer in. That one is covered by the mill levy that we set. So the mill levy is a general fund thing, the streets are a general fund thing. So the money that we bring in from the mill levy, the 2.67 mills, goes into this fund to help fund the street debt that we have. Okay. What are you looking at?
I'm not. No, I am.
Did I mess up?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
I know I harp on this, but $130,000 for 20 years is $2.6 million. So we financed $1.7 million in streets, and it cost us $900,000 in interest. Probably not the wisest move forward. And that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Seems like a good idea. I don't know.
You didn't vote on it.
Sorry. I thought it was something we needed.
Okay, so talking about the fund balance forecast, now we go back to our policy where we set 25% as a remaining balance. I think there's an exception to the rule in a debt service fund because it's basically this one and the library. You're not gonna keep those types of funds necessarily on hand. I went ahead and did the scenario though, and you can see where we're gonna drop down after we make that large defeasance transfer out of our fund. But I believe that, you know, with our mill levy increase, I mean, as long as we're covering our debt payments, that's the important part here. Keeping 25% may not be as important in this fund. Key forecast assumptions are ad valorem taxes. The revenue is expected to grow and increase just as it did in the general fund. Our special assessment revenue will rise as new projects, you know, come on and start filling that. Our pilot revenue, this is something, it's projected to grow with the property value increase and the retail activity in the STAR bond, and after that STAR bond is paid off, we get more revenue in from those things as well to help cover that. There is a little bit of a lag in revenues versus expenses there related to the Goddard Olympic Park. And there may come a time where if the CID and the revenues and the interest, everything that's coming in for that and the pilot don't cover that, and we start having to eat too much of that into that, we may refinance that to push that back out just a little bit until those revenue sources start coming in and start catching up with that. But in the meantime, I feel like we're fine to just keep going as we're going. We actually set a yearly calendar invite with bond counsel to talk about that, to make sure we're not missing that as we're trying to do this.
Quick note, sorry, because I know it's running late, but I think that is the solution. Unfortunately, it gets back to what you said earlier. You're in a worse interest rate environment than you were when you took on that debt, and so by refinancing so you can cover those payments, you're going to be paying more in the long run because you're going to be paying more in interest costs. So,
Plus over time is.
but we do have a calendar note to discuss it in a year, so we'll either be refinancing or we'll be finding some other way to cover that.
Right. And in the fund balance forecast here, you can see where we do kind of drop down below kind of substantially in 2028 down to 14.89%. And again, this is truly driven because we're moving out that cash that we need to account for and keep and save and send to people to pay off, let the trustee handle it. But you know, we dropped down to 364,000 in 2028 if we keep this up. But a lot of things are going to change with the special assessments filling in, Olympic Park filling in a little better. So those are some things that we're going to look at just to make sure. But again, it's below our policy. I don't know if policy is necessary in this instance. That would be a call for you guys to determine. But we'll keep an eye on this fund. We can't go zero, and we've got to make our debt payment. So, you know, we're good for the next few years at least. I feel like we're fine, and it's all going to catch up and even out into the future. So, question?
And when you say over under, that's over or under the reserve policy,
Yeah.
not over and under as in
You're checking it.
you're under zero.
No.
Yeah.
Under the reserve requirement, yeah. But again, typically this should be kind of an in and out, you know?
Zero sum.
Right, so. That's why when we had so much cash sitting in there, I was like, I don't know why it's here. And so, trying to figure that out was that. So any questions on debt service? Any concerns? Because that's pretty much it. I mean, it can be a little wild with bond proceeds and, you know, projects that come in, but I think we're projecting out, you know, everything runs through tent notes usually initially, and then we know when it's going to go to permanent financing to go into this fund to make sure the debt payments are covered. So. Okay. Yes.
Where does our admin fee factor into that? I mean, does that factor into, you know, the preferences, 2023? Is there a forecast on that, or how do you feel that would be?
The admin fee is actually it's pulled out when when we go to permanent financing, it's pulled out of the cash that we get for that, and it doesn't go in here. It goes into the general fund in that administrative line item that we saw yesterday. And I have just forecasted $150,000 in that line item, at least for next year. We're gonna get more this year than that, but that's just kind of a baseline. I mean, we can kind of look at the projects and do that 5% calculation like you do all the time, but it isn't here. It's pulled out of the proceeds. We get that cash and we're able to put that in the general fund, and it's not in this group here. Yeah.
When maybe you said this, but it has to go there because statutorily it's supposed to go towards the administrative costs. We can't use it for debt service.
Good.
You good? Okay. One more. Poor Carrie's been sitting here all night. Library fund. This is really pretty simple. One of the major things about this fund is whatever we tell them that we're budgeting, we have to give it to them, and we can't give them $1 more. So let's say we budget $100,000 for them as their distribution based on their mill and everything. It isn't that number, and we get $150,000 because valuations went up and everything was great. We can only give them $100,000. It's it's a rule. So a lot of times in that situation, we have this excess fund. If that happens, sometimes it's small. Usually it's a few $1,000s. We'll make a big lump sum in the January to catch up and clean out the library fund to make sure they're getting their payments as quickly as we can give it to them.
They do get the excess. It's just
They have to wait a little bit.
They gotta wait because of the budgetary authority.
Right. And we do that calculation every time we get it in. You know, we run that scenario, make sure we're not over budget, send them their check, and that's the way that works. So they get 3 mills dedicated to the library operations. Like I mentioned, all the revenue is just transferred directly to the library. As a reminder, our assessed valuation is set at about $87 million, and that is going to generate around $262,000. And that number there doesn't include all of the motor fuel and all of the subsequent taxes. I think that's about another $20,000 on top of that they're going to get. You'll see in a second. That's up 13.2%, or 1.7. So, here's a rundown of all the revenues that they receive. Again, in 2026, we're projecting to distribute out $283,988. In the actual budget, we'll probably round that up to something to make it a little cleaner, but I mean, it'll be close to that. Year-over-year change, you can see in 2025 they brought in that $35,000. 2026, right now it's going to be about $27,000, but I bet it may be a little bit more, and that's the number we'll be end up using to make that catch-up payment to get them to the $35,000 that we didn't give them from the general fund, which will come out of the general fund, but it'll be the difference of that. So this is real easy. Payments to the library, done. There it is. I mean, there's nothing more than that. So you can see over time, these are the numbers that we've distributed to them. Year-over-year change, from 2023 to 2024, it was at 14%, 16%, budgeted at about 12%. Yeah. Okay. Questions? That's it. Unless you got any questions.
Now's the time. It's only once a year where we workshop the general fund.
So proud of you all for hanging in. This is tough stuff. Tough.
I think it's fun.
I want to also thank the staff. I know you all thank the staff, but I'm the one harassing them every 5 minutes about things, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the willingness to participate and try and learn and be part of it, and
Walk by her office.
yeah. So.
He's already got the taser you need?
Yeah. So.
Appreciate all your work, everyone. I mean,
Yes.
If we do have questions, we'll have some other meetings, so if things do come up, it's not like we can't talk about this again. And hopefully sometime here in the near future, based on the schedule, actually we'll vote on this and approve it.
Yeah.
And we'll have opportunities for public to comment. It's a thorough process, every city goes through it.
So the next funds that we'll talk about, originally I had streets down, I'm gonna move streets up, that'll be next. And then we'll do this next batch in the next meeting that we have, water utilities, sewer utility, and stormwater utility. I'm gonna keep the reserve funds with them as well. I'm gonna present those together because that makes sense. And then we'll do the tourism and promotions, capital improvement, equipment reserve, and we have a bunch of little small funds that you just probably need to be aware that we have them. There isn't any really whole lot going on with them.
Rick, one thing we might have the council think about is at that next city council meeting will be the resolution for the intent to exceed revenue neutral. At this point, our plan is to have that 39.267 mils, which of course is 2 mils. It's just keeping in line with the plan that we established last year. But if there are other things that have been floating around in the back of your head and you even think there's a small chance that the council may want to go above that number for that reason, we are just setting the highest top level at that point, and we can still work our way down. But whatever number we put there, we cannot go higher than as we work our way towards certifying this late summer, early fall. So you got another week and a half to think about that, and we can, we'll have several council meetings that you could, if there is something, you could bring it to our attention. But at this point, that 39.267 mils is what we're going to be presenting to you guys on July 7th. And that's how this budget is built. It's basically all built around that. So if that changes, all of this kind of goes out the window, and we've got a lot of work to do. So just want to make that clear so you understand. That's still more work.
Yes, yeah. No, and I think it's important, as we work through this last year, that the discussions that we had about, increasing the mill levy, that it really revolved around a discussion about streets. And I think we're just, if we do increase the 2 mills, we're being consistent with what we said we were going to do last year. And I think it's important that as we say things from the bench that we try to honor those things. And I think so by doing a 2 mil increase, we're not deviating from what the original discussions were last year. This year we are spending $1 million plus on streets. We'll spend $1 million next year plus on streets, and the following years after that. And I'm just thankful that we're not grinding them up and sending them back to gravel. So it takes money to do it. We set a direction on this, and I think hopefully people appreciate the fact that our word's good and that we are operating in a way that's consistent with what we said last year. So. Any other comments?
Well, our next meeting, hang on here, not yet.
Go ahead, I'm good.
So our next meeting, like Craig said, on Monday, July 7th, we will plan to present the resolution of intent to exceed R&R. So we will have that finalized. That will need to be turned into the county really quickly. So plan to do it the very next day. We have a budget workshop coming up on July 10th. We'll talk about, again, like I said, water, sewer, streets, stormwater. Tuesday, July 2nd is our next budget workshop for everything else. 22nd, sorry, 22nd. In August, we have room for more discussion and meetings if anybody so wants them. And then Wednesday, August 13th, we are going to do a community engagement event. So basically at that point in time, we'll have it all done. Or really draft up in a presentation form so we can show the community, if anybody wanna come, we would love to have you. And anybody else, what we plan to do and how we've worked through this. And then September 2nd, we will do the public hearing, the R&R hearing and the budget hearing, and hopefully adopt the budget. So it's kind of the timeline that we're working for. Everything has to be to the county by October 1st this year, so. Okay.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn this evening. Do I have a second? Naomi seconds, all those in favor? Aye. 3-0 pass. Thank you, everyone.